Look, it's really easy to get excited about all that old world charm and craftsmanship, but before you go pulling the trigger on that old home and create more buyer's remorse than millennials own plants, let's take a few things under consideration. First, let's talk about prior renovations. And you may be saying, wait, hold on, I thought renovations would be a good thing. Yes, maybe. And these renovations, if they're done by a reputable builder and done properly with permits and somebody who is familiar with old homes, there are plenty of things that can go wrong with an old home if done improperly. This would be concrete mixed in with old lime mortar, or someone who has never really touched plaster before. Plaster is different than drywall. You want to make sure that whoever is touching that home or done the work has done it properly. One of the things you want to make sure you pay attention to is maybe look up the old city records and compare them to the listing details. If there's a bedroom that's listed on the listing that's not on the old records, they may have not done permits on that project and may be cause for concern. Not only will that hurt you on the appraisal value potentially, but it also could cause a lot of headaches further down the road. Next, let's talk about old mechanicals. And this is anything from HVAC to furnace and hot water heater. The older the mechanicals, the more likely they are to break down. And depending on the person who owned the home prior, will also depend on how well they've been maintained. You know, a car like a Toyota can last for hundreds of thousands of miles, but if you don't change the oil on it, it won't last for any length of time. Now, if you're buying the house from an older couple who barely use the hot water heater, every other day or so, and you're moving in with 2 or 3 or 4 teenagers, then the load that's placed on that hot water heater is going to be much, much higher. The likelihood of it breaking down also increases. If this old home has, let's say, an oil burner, well, not only do you have oil, which is more expensive to order and maintained, you also may have an oil tank that's buried somewhere in the yard that might have to be mitigated. There's an expense attached to that. But that old system is usually going to take more money to maintain over the long term. Converting it to a new, updated, modern, efficient system is going to cost thousands of dollars. You want to make sure that it has a good service history so that you're not adopting a whole bunch of problems. Another really common thing on older homes is going to be the lack of central HVAC. This is forced air. You heat or cool the air, you blow it into the rooms. You may have radiant heat in some of these older homes. And so the cost of converting that over, again, could be tens of thousands of dollars depending on if there are places to run the ductwork or not. I'm not saying don't buy the old home because of this. What I am saying is that you want to do your due diligence before purchasing the home and really have a full evaluation of what you're stepping into. You may want to go ahead and coordinate with a local HVAC contractor that's familiar with old homes that can kind of give you an estimate of what you're walking into prior to purchasing. All right, let's talk about lead paint. Lead paint usually was used in homes for decades and decades prior to 1978. In 1978, it was outlawed nationally and is no longer used in homes. There's a whole bunch of health problems associated with lead paint, and so they got it off the shelves. Now, that doesn't mean that magically it disappeared out of the homes. If you're buying a home built before 1978 in our area, there's an actual disclosure that has to be signed recognizing that it has a high potential of existing in the home. Now, there are several ways to get rid of lead paint. If you're going to actually get rid of it, it can cost tens of thousands of dollars. But the main way that people do it, and it's cheap, is to encapsulate, which literally just means to paint over it. This may or may not work. It really kind of depends on the underlying layer. If it's cracking and peeling, right, if you paint over that, it may only last for a short period of time. If you're going to tackle this as a DIY project, which a lot of people do, make sure to wear your proper PPE or personal protective equipment so that you're not putting yourself or your family at risk. Now, a lot of home inspection companies have testing kits, so at the time of the inspection, if you want to test to see if any of the cracking and peeling paint is lead-based, or you can pick up one from Home Depot and do that yourself. The reality is that if the house was built before 1978 in America, that it has a high likelihood that it has lead paint. But prior to 1950, and the older you get, the higher that likelihood exists. Now, the actual statistic that I was able to pull up was anything that was built prior to 1940 has an 87% chance of having some type of lead-based product in it. Hey, if you love old homes, hit that like button. I live in one myself, so smash. Now, the older the home gets, the more likely it is that it has old building practices in it. And one of the things that you're going to want to evaluate is wiring. Now, when the homes were originally built, and again, this is the older the home gets, the more likely this is to occur, that it wasn't built for modern electrical loads, right? We have all of this lighting that goes on. We have a ton of entertainment. We've got all of these plugins. The kitchen has all of these high-end appliances that have huge draws of electrical load that pull on it. You know, I'm looking at you, Blendtec. And these old homes just were not built for all of this electrical load. This can become a major problem and or fire risk if you move into this house and you put a much larger electrical load on the system than what was previously designed for. A lot of people have gone through and built out the home and had the knob and tube or aluminum wire ripped out of the house and had it replaced. You know, but that cost tens of thousands of dollars. What we're finding is that more and more home insurance companies are not covering these homes with those previous systems in place. And so some homeowners have to actually get it done prior to selling because they have a home inspection after home inspection that a buyer backs out on. Now, again, you can buy a home with these systems in place. What I would highly recommend is that you have a really good electrician who's familiar with old homes that can kind of walk through and make sure they do an extra level of inspection to make sure that you can safely live in this home without any risks. You just don't want to put yourself and your family at risk just because the home inspection says, hey, these things are present, you just need to know about that. I would highly recommend that if knob and tube or aluminum wire exist in the home at the time of a home inspection, that you get that extra level of inspection done. All right, let's talk about weird smells next. If you've ever heard the quote, where there is smoke, there is a fire, same thing when it comes to odd smells. Those odd smells come from somewhere, and it could be as, benign as something as, mothballs or something along those lines, or it could be, that there's an actual moisture problem or a dead animal in the attic or walls. That has actually happened. You just don't want to put yourself in a position where the realtor goes, oh yeah, that's just an old house smell. If there's something that is telling your nose something funky is up and you still love the home, make sure to go ahead and get that extra layer of protection and get a mold test during the home inspection. Many home inspectors add this as an extra service that you can tack on to the home inspection period. It is going to cost some money, however. Now, I will quickly mention here that surface level mold is generally pretty easy to get rid of. It's really when it gets behind walls and in between things that really can become a problem, because it's almost impossible to get rid of it without ripping everything out. And that can become very, very costly. Not to mention that if you have a family member that is extremely sensitive or has asthma or any type of respiratory problem, you want to know these things exist prior to pulling the trigger on that purchase. Now, this next one is not necessarily a deal killer, but it's something that you should pay attention to and can be a serious leech on those electrical bills. And this is going to be poor insulation. Now, the R value is just something that tells you basically how well insulated something is. And most home inspectors are going to tell you whether an area is inadequate or has sufficient insulation in that area. Now, this is one of those weekend projects that you could probably take on that's not too expensive. You can go rent a cellulose blower and grab a whole bunch of it and do it yourself as a DIY project over a weekend, and you can drastically increase. If you're going to put it into any area, focus mainly on the ceiling. That's where the majority of the energy loss happens. And you don't really need to go overboard here. The reality is the older the home is, the more leaky it is. Just means, it's an old house, so it's got little holes here and there. It's not as airtight as some of the modern builds are out there. But a little bit of insulation could overall drastically reduce your electrical bills during the winter and summer. The reality is that if you're looking for a house built before 1980, you probably also have some asbestos in there. Again, the older the house is, the more likely this is to exist, and it's something that you should pay attention to. For the most part, asbestos really isn't harmful until it becomes airborne, when it becomes friable and all those particles get up into the air, and that's when it becomes hazardous to your health. There are semi-inexpensive ways to deal with this. You can encapsulate it, which is just wrapping it up and getting done. But really, if it's becoming friable, that crumbly, airborne, particle-laden mess, you want to get rid of it. And the problem there is that getting rid of asbestos is very expensive. And you want to make sure that whoever you hire to do this is licensed and insured, because if they do it inappropriately or improperly, you're going to get a ton of asbestos in the air, which is extremely hazardous. It's the crumbling and the tearing of that out, which becomes very, very toxic. Hey, are you looking to make a move to the Virginia Beach area and you want to make that process as seamless and smooth as possible? We have a dedicated team of real estate and mortgage professionals here to make that wish come true. The link below down in the description is to a 100% free custom consultation to jump right into our calendars to create a customized success plan for you and your family. All right, let's talk about the top of the house, which is the roof. If there's a leaky roof, that can be a huge, huge issue. Now, with older homes, usually comes with older building materials. You have slate, Spanish tile, cedar roofs. And all those building types are extremely beautiful and highly desired for most people looking for an older home. They typically are much more expensive to repair and maintain. Now, any of these building material types, if you're going to be buying an old home and you see missing slate tiles or one that's cattywonk and maybe not sitting like it should be, it might be worthwhile looking into a specific roof inspection at the time of purchase. I'll give you a perfect example on the house that I have in Norfolk. It's a 1912 4-square home with the original tile on the roof. Absolutely gorgeous, love it. When we bought the house, I saw a few things that were wrong with it. Unfortunately, we were in a very tough seller's market, and so I had to just buy the house as is. But when we went back and had the roof inspected, there was about $6,000 or $7,000 worth of repairs that needed to be done. Some that were immediate, some that were a little bit later, something that, again, maybe could be avoided in a less aggressive market. Obviously, this ties a little bit into one of the previous things we talked about. If you do actually have an active roof leak, well, water and houses don't really mix. And all that water and moisture getting into your home can cause more issues with mold, or a variety of issues when it comes to plaster and anything that should be dry that now is wet. Let's roll on to those nasty little boogers called termites. Now, the older the home, usually the more dense the wood that it was built with, because it's old growth wood, which was sometimes a little bit more resilient to those bugs. However, modern building materials are typically dipped in just really caustic materials so that it keeps bugs from getting into the wood and causing termite damage. However, if you're seeing bulging walls or little things that are dipping and sagging around the house, this could be an indication of something behind it. And many times you don't see the termite damage that exists until you actually start digging. This is one of the reasons why in our area, most lenders are going to require a professional termite and moisture inspection before they will actually underwrite that loan. They don't want you moving in there. There end up being tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage, and then you end up defaulting on the loan. That is not financially smart. So that's why they require that before you actually even close on the home. The big thing here is you want to make sure that you have a company that's doing that, that's reputable, is licensed and bonded and insured, and has a great reputation amongst the majority of the realtors in the area. This could be as small as a couple $100s of an old tube and something that just needs a basic treatment, or if it's something really extensive, could end up being tens of thousands of dollars. All right, last one on the list here is going to be old windows. Now, this is a sore subject because I love the old windows. The majority of the wood, like I was saying, in old homes was actually better building materials than modern building materials. And what you'll find is a lot of people have gone over and painted these things shut, or the balances are broken. Now, you may be tempted to go in there and rip all of these out and replace them. Totally get it. There are some companies out there that teach DIY projects on how to do this properly. Scott Sidler of the Craftsman blog is a great resource. Hopefully we'll put something up on the side here. But if you end up having to replace all of these, it can be a very, very costly project. So whatever you're looking at old homes or buying an old home, you really want to get a good evaluation of the condition of the windows and whether they operate and work. And they can be very inefficient when it comes to energy as well. So just something to pay attention to. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. YouTube thinks that you might like this one next.